Elena sat quietly at the farthest corner of the elegant Italian restaurant, her reflection flickering in the polished window beside her. Soft violin music drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of garlic butter and aged wine. Around her, laughter and conversation filled every table. Couples toasted to love, birthdays, and anniversaries. But at her small table for one, only a single candle burned, its flame trembling just like her heart. It was her birthday. She had promised herself she wouldn't feel lonely this year, that she'd treat herself to something beautiful. She wore her favorite navy dress, the one that made her eyes look brighter, and tied her hair up the way she used to when she still believed in romance. She even ordered her favorite dessert, tiramisu, before dinner, a small rebellion against the sadness creeping in. But as she scrolled through her phone, seeing no new messages or calls, the loneliness returned like a cruel shadow. She forced a smile when the waiter poured her wine. "Expecting anyone else, miss?" he asked politely. She shook her head. "No, just me." He nodded, offering a sympathetic smile before walking away. Elena glanced around. Everyone seemed to belong. Couples leaning in close, men whispering promises, women laughing softly. She felt invisible among them, like a ghost sitting in a world that had moved on without her. Then the air in the restaurant shifted. A sudden hush rippled through the room, quieting the laughter, dimming the chatter. The front doors opened, and a man stepped inside. Lorenzo Moretti. Even Elena had heard his name whispered through city rumors, a man powerful enough to make politicians nervous and rivals disappear. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black tailored suit that cost more than most cars, he walked with the kind of confidence that came from danger. 2 bodyguards flanked him, scanning the room. His sharp jaw and piercing dark eyes drew every gaze in the room like magnets. He didn't look like a man searching for company. He looked like a man used to owning the room. Elena dropped her eyes to her glass, pretending not to stare. Her pulse quickened for reasons she couldn't explain. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her heart race, even though she knew she should look away. But then, Lorenzo did something no one expected. He stopped walking. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept across the restaurant, and landed right on her. The lonely woman sitting alone with her untouched meal. For a moment, his expression softened, curiosity flickering behind his guarded stare. He said something quietly to one of his men, who nodded and stepped back. Then Lorenzo started walking toward her. Elena's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. This couldn't be real. Every eye in the restaurant followed him as he crossed the floor, his polished shoes echoing softly against the marble. He stopped at her table. "As this seat taken?" His voice was smooth, low, carrying the hint of an Italian accent that curled around each word like smoke. Elena blinked, unsure how to respond. No, but I think." Before she could finish, he pulled out the chair and sat down across from her as if he'd been invited. The waiter hurried over, looking terrified, but Lorenzo waved him off with a slight gesture. "I'm Lorenzo," he said simply, his eyes never leaving hers. Elena's throat went dry. I know who you are." He smirked slightly, resting his hands on the table. "Then you also know I don't enjoy eating alone." She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. Around them, whispers filled the room again, curiosity and fear mingling in the air. Lorenzo leaned forward, his gaze softening as he studied her face. "You don't belong here, do you?" he murmured. "You look like someone trying to disappear." Elena hesitated, caught between the urge to run and the strange comfort in his voice. "Maybe I am." He smiled faintly, as if he understood loneliness better than anyone else. Then, with a quiet certainty that sent shivers down her spine, he said, "Not tonight, Bella. Tonight, you're not alone." And for the first time that evening, Elena believed him. Lorenzo's phone buzzed sharply against the polished table, breaking the fragile spell between them. He pulled it out, his expression turning from calm to tense in a heartbeat. His jaw clenched as he read a message, and a faint muscle twitched in his cheek. The air around him seemed to grow heavier. Elena watched, unsure whether to speak. The elegant restaurant suddenly felt too quiet, too watchful. The waiter approached timidly with their meals, but Lorenzo held up one finger, eyes still fixed on his phone. After a long pause, he finally slipped it back into his jacket and leaned closer to her. His cologne, Something dark and expensive, wrapped around her like smoke. Listen carefully, he whispered, voice barely above a breath. A few men just walked in. They're watching me. For the next hour, you're my wife. Elena blinked, stunned. What, your wife? She repeated, her voice trembling. Lorenzo's eyes hardened, but his tone remained soft. If they believe you're with me, they won't risk anything here. But if they suspect I'm alone, this place could become a war zone. So you'll smile, talk, drink, just like a woman in love. Can you do that, Bella? Her mind spun. It was insane, impossible, but the cold look in his eyes told her this wasn't a game. She nodded, barely managing a whisper. Okay. The change in him was instant. Lorenzo's hand reached across the table, covering hers with practiced intimacy. To anyone watching, they were a couple sharing a private moment. His grip was warm but firm, grounding her trembling hands. Smile, he murmured. Elena tried. It felt awkward at first, but when Lorenzo's thumb brushed her knuckles gently, her lips curved into something that almost looked natural. Good, he said quietly, eyes glinting with approval. Now talk. Tell me something real, something about you. She hesitated. I'm a teacher, she said finally. Literature. I love books, stories, anything that makes people feel something. Lorenzo's expression softened for a moment. A teacher, he repeated, as if the word itself was foreign to his world. Beautiful. You bring order to chaos. I destroy it. Before she could respond, he leaned in close, brushing his lips near her ear. To anyone watching, it looked like a romantic whisper. But his words were all business. They're still watching, he murmured. Two men by the bar. One in the back near the exit. Keep your eyes on me, cara mia. No fear. Her heart thundered. She forced herself to look at him instead of turning her head. His eyes held hers, steady and unyielding, and something inside her began to trust him, though she didn't understand why. He lifted his glass of wine and nodded to her. To my beautiful wife, he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. She raised her glass shakily. To us. They drank, pretending to laugh, and for a few moments, the danger around them melted into the illusion. Lorenzo's deep voice and quiet charm almost made her forget the reason behind the act. His smile wasn't the cold, practiced smirk of a man used to power. It was gentler, fleeting, human. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and his calm facade cracked. They're moving, he whispered. We have to leave, now. Elena's pulse spiked. Leave. But, he stood, pulling out a thick wad of cash and tossing it onto the table. Now, Elena. She rose shakily, grabbing her purse. As they walked toward the exit, Lorenzo slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as if they were newlyweds leaving a romantic dinner. But she could feel the tension in his body, the way his muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. Outside, the night was sharp with the scent of rain. A sleek black car idled by the curb. Lorenzo opened the door for her, his tone low but urgent. Get in. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then obeyed. The door shut with a solid thud. He slid in beside her, signaling his driver with one curt nod. As the car sped away from the glowing restaurant lights, Elena turned to him, her voice trembling. Who are those men? Lorenzo looked out the window, his reflection cold and unreadable. Enemies, he said quietly. And now, because you're with me, they'll think you matter. Her stomach dropped. Matter. To them. He turned his gaze back to her, eyes dark as night. No. To me. And in that single, dangerous sentence, Elena realized her life had just changed forever. The moment they pulled away from the restaurant, the city outside blurred into streaks of light. Tires screeched as Lorenzo's car sped through narrow streets, chased by shadows. The driver's hands were tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the rearview mirror. Elena sat frozen in the passenger seat, gripping her seatbelt as fear burned through her veins. She had never been in danger before, not like this. What's happening? She asked, voice shaking. Lorenzo's tone was calm but clipped, every word precise. They followed us. 2 cars, maybe 3. Stay down. Before she could react, a gunshot shattered the rear window. Glass rained down like icy dust. Elena screamed, ducking instinctively as Lorenzo reached for the gun hidden beneath his coat. His body moved with the instinct of someone who'd lived through this too many times. Drive faster, he barked. The driver swerved hard, taking a sharp turn into an alleyway. The car jolted violently, throwing Elena against the seat. She clutched the door handle, her heart hammering so fast she could hardly breathe. Lorenzo leaned out the window, returning fire with 2 precise shots. The chasing headlights blinked and vanished as the sound of screeching metal echoed behind them. The city blurred by again, a storm of light and fear. "Are you hit?" Lorenzo asked suddenly, turning toward her. His voice had softened, though his eyes still burned with tension. She shook her head, trembling. No, I'm okay." He exhaled slowly, his hand brushing away shards of glass from her hair. "You did good back there," he murmured. "You didn't panic." She gave a shaky laugh. "I'm panicking now." For the first time, he smiled, a faint, fleeting curve of his lips. "That's allowed." Minutes later, the car pulled into a hidden driveway, concealed behind tall iron gates and ivy-covered walls. The gates closed automatically behind them, sealing them inside a vast, silent estate. The rain began to fall, tapping against the windows as if urging them to stay quiet. Lorenzo opened her door, holding out a hand. She hesitated but took it, stepping out into the cool night air. The mansion before her loomed dark and elegant, every window glowing faintly with gold light. It was beautiful, and terrifying. "Where are we?" she whispered. "My safe house," he replied simply. "No one knows this place exists except the people I trust. And, you trust me." He glanced at her, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "I'm about to find out." Inside, the house was all marble floors and expensive silence. The faint scent of cigars lingered in the air. Lorenzo shrugged off his jacket, revealing a dark red stain spreading across his white shirt. Elena gasped. "You're hurt," she said, rushing toward him. "It's nothing," he muttered, but the wince that followed betrayed him. She grabbed a towel from a nearby counter and pressed it against his shoulder. "It's not nothing. You're bleeding." Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her. Most people were terrified of him, too scared to even meet his eyes. But she wasn't running, she was helping him. He let out a breath, a strange softness flickering in his gaze. "Sit," she ordered quietly, guiding him toward a couch. He obeyed without protest, surprising even himself. She found a first aid kit on a shelf and began cleaning the wound, her hands trembling only slightly. When the alcohol touched his skin, he hissed but didn't pull away. "You're full of surprises, Elena." "I teach kids," she said with a faint smile. "I've seen worse paper cuts." He chuckled softly, but the sound was laced with pain. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "You don't belong in my world." She met his eyes, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Then why did you bring me into it?" He didn't answer right away. The rain outside grew heavier, thunder rumbling in the distance. Finally, he said quietly, "Because I needed someone real, and you were the only thing in that room that felt real." Elena froze, the words cutting through the fear and confusion like lightning. For a moment, the chaos of gunfire and danger faded. There was just him, broken, bleeding, powerful, and her, trembling but unafraid. As she finished wrapping his shoulder, Lorenzo caught her wrist gently. "You could still leave," he said, voice low. "I'll have someone drive you home. Forget tonight ever happened." But she didn't move. Instead, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "I don't think I can." Lorenzo's jaw tightened, a war flickering behind his expression. Then, without warning, he leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Then, Bella Mia, you've just crossed the line." And as thunder roared outside, Elena realized she already had. The storm outside raged until dawn, the steady drum of rain against the windows filling the mansion with a restless rhythm. Elena sat beside the fireplace, her mind spinning from everything that had happened: the gunfire, the chase, the fear, and most of all, Lorenzo. He had fallen asleep on the couch nearby, exhaustion finally catching up to him. His face, usually hard and unreadable, now seemed almost peaceful in the flickering firelight. She couldn't stop staring. Beneath the layers of danger and authority, there was something painfully human about him. He wasn't just a man who commanded fear, he was a man who carried too many ghosts. Lorenzo stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw her sitting quietly, his lips curved faintly. "Still here," he murmured. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly. Too much. Everything. He sat up slowly, wincing as his shoulder reminded him of the bullet that had grazed him. You shouldn't have stayed, he said. Most people would have run the second the first shot was fired. Alina's eyes met his. Maybe I'm not most people. He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. Then he stood, walking toward the window. The rain had begun to slow, the sky outside pale with the first hint of morning. You don't understand what this means, he said quietly. The men who came for me, they won't stop. They saw you with me. That makes you a target. The words hit her like ice. A target, she whispered. He turned, his eyes dark and intense. Yes, and I can't let them touch you. Which means you can't go back to your old life, not yet. She took a shaky breath. So what? You're keeping me here, like a prisoner. No, he said firmly. Like someone I have to protect. For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then, softly, she said, Why me, Lorenzo? You could have chosen anyone in that restaurant. Why sit at my table? He hesitated, the question hanging between them like smoke. Finally, he said, Because you looked like someone who didn't belong there. Like someone who knew pain but didn't let it harden her. When you looked up at me, I didn't see fear. I saw honesty. Elena swallowed hard. That's not reason enough to destroy my life. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. Maybe not, but it's reason enough to save it. Something in his tone made her chest ache. She looked away, trying to steady her breathing. You make it sound like I don't have a choice. You do, he said softly. You always have. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver key, placing it on the table between them. If you want to leave, that key opens the gate. My driver will take you anywhere you want to go. But if you stay, his gaze caught hers, burning with something raw. If you stay, you'll step into my world. And there's no turning back from that. Elena stared at the key. Her mind screamed at her to take it, to run, to find safety. But her heart, traitorous and confused, told her something entirely different. She thought of how he had shielded her, how his eyes softened when he spoke to her, how underneath all his power and ruthlessness there was a man who seemed desperately alone. Slowly, she stood. Her fingers brushed the key but didn't take it. Instead, she walked toward him. He looked down at her, his breath catching slightly as she stopped just inches away. The firelight painted gold across her face, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. I should leave, she whispered. Yes, he said, voice low, rough. You should, but I won't. His jaw tightened, as if fighting the emotion behind his composure. You have no idea what you're walking into, Bella Mia. My world will swallow you whole. She met his gaze, unflinching. Then let it. I'm already halfway gone. Lorenzo's hand rose, hesitating for just a moment before he cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. His touch was careful, almost reverent, the touch of a man who wasn't used to gentleness. Tonight, he murmured, his forehead resting against hers, you were my wife because I needed to survive. But now, I'm not sure I can survive without you. Outside, the first light of morning broke through the clouds. Inside, two souls, one broken by power, the other healed by courage, stood at the edge of a choice neither could undo. Elena closed her eyes, her voice trembling but certain. Then tonight, she whispered, I'll be your wife for real. And as the rain stopped and silence filled the dawn, Lorenzo pulled her close, not like a possession, but like a promise he didn't know how to keep.